It's now time to run our first query using DAX Studio. In this section, you learn how to run a query. I'll give you a brief description of what the cache is and how to clear the cache before running a query. And we'll also see how to change the key assignment to run a query. In the meantime, we will also take a look at the query history, which is extremely useful when you run multiple queries and you want to retrieve a previous one. Let's get started. The first thing that we need to do in order to run a query is to write it. So let me write a simple query like evaluate summarize columns. So we summarize by date, calendar year, and we want a new column amount, which computes the sales amount. Now I have a query and I can run it just by clicking on the Run button. I can either use the button or hit F5 in order to execute the query. So let me click the button, and now the query is executed and you see the result here. Keep in mind that the result panel can be increased or decreased in size by using Ctrl and the mouse wheel. This is extremely convenient if you want to zoom and focus on the numbers that you have retrieved. Whenever you run a query, it is automatically saved in the query history. Again, let me zoom in a bit. Query history contains the history of all the queries that you have executed. So you have the start time, the number of rows returned, the milliseconds executed by the time and by the server name, and other useful information. If you want to execute again the query, it's enough to double click on the query, which is now not visible. Let me clear everything from here. If you just double click on it, it will copy the content of the query back in the editor. And this is extremely useful when you are modifying a query and you want to look at the previous version that you probably forgot. One important detail about run is that you have the option of running the query or running the query after having cleared the cache. You can also clear the cache straight from this button. What is the cache and why is it important to know about it? Well, whenever you execute a query, part of the query, the storage engine queries, for instance, is cached, is kept in memory already computed. And this is useful because next time the engine needs to retrieve the same data, it does not need to scan again the database. It is useful, it makes the engine faster, but if you are doing a performance analysis, you don't want the cache. Because if you keep the cache active, every time you run the query, you might have different results because of the cache usage. So you can either change the behavior from here, you can run the query or clear the cache and then run the query. Or if you want to manually clear the cache, you can just hit this button. Cancel is mainly useful if you have a very long running query and you want to stop the query because you don't want to wait for the answer. You already know it's taking too long. So if the query is still running, you can click on cancel. Right now, the queries we are running are so fast that the button doesn't even lit up. I said at the beginning, you use F5 in order to run a query, but you can change that. Under the options, you can change several behaviors of DAX Studio. Let me zoom in. So under key bindings, you see that for running a query, you have F5 as the default or Ctrl-E. You can change them from here, changing the key binding. And there are also other options. We will see all of them in detail at the last, but during the training, it's good to see the different options which are available. Another useful option is under query history, where here you save the number of items that you want to keep in the query history and whether you want or not to show the trace timings. Again, depending on the kind of user you are, you might only save the previous queries in order to have them handy, or you might also want to save the timing because maybe you are doing performance analysis and you want to view the time that has been taken in order to execute a previous query. Another important point is in the default, the set clear and cache and run as a default. Again, if you are just using DAX Studio to run queries and to practice with DAX, then you probably don't want to have always the clear cache button enabled. But if, like me, you are spending most of the time to do performance analysis, then having the clear cache and run as the default helps a lot. So we have seen the basic introduction to how to run a query. Next, we will start looking at more advanced features, but for now, that's enough before we move to the next point.